18 years is a long time to spend staring into the mouths of the dead. Long enough that routine becomes armor and protocol becomes scripture. I often remind interns that teeth are the most reliable recorders of truth. They do not rot like soft tissue, do not warp like fingerprints under heat, do not lie like witnesses. Teeth survive. In my profession, they are the black boxes of the human body, preserving the final evidence long after the rest has crumbled to dust. I built my career on that certainty. At St. Jude's County Medical Examiner's Office, the corridors never change. Narrow halls panelled with sterile tile, fluorescent lights that hum faintly overhead. The antiseptic scent layered thick to suppress the sour trace of decomposition that always manages to slip through. I know every step from the staff entrance to my lab. I could walk it blindfolded, counting the clicks of my heels against the scuffed linoleum. Familiarity, in this place, is a form of survival. The lab itself is unremarkable by modern standards, though I've seen it outlast newer facilities that collapsed under budget cuts. Our equipment is a little dated, X-ray machines that buzz, refrigeration units that rumble like restless animals, but I trust them. Their imperfections are known, variables. In my work, the only true danger is the unknown. Every case I have taken on over the years has fit within the boundaries of protocol. We have a procedure for everything. Charting dental records, matching post-mortem impressions to ante-mortem files, logging anomalies, writing the same reports in the same language so that no detail is ever lost to ambiguity. Order is not just a convenience here. It is the wall that separates fact from chaos. And yet, as I sit here now, trying to reconstruct how it all began, I realize that wall was never as solid as I believed. It only took one case, one body pulled from a forgotten corner of the world, to undo the logic I had lived by. I thought I had seen it all. Fire victims reduced to brittle skeletons, jaws shattered in car wrecks, the silent testimony of teeth that bore witness to violence unspeakable. But the case that would come to define me was none of those. It was something else, something unholy, though I hesitate to use that word. Because in my field, words like unholy do not belong, and yet no other word will do. The body arrived on a rain-heavy morning, escorted by county deputies who looked relieved to hand it over. They told me it had been found bricked into the basement of an abandoned rural church, discovered only because a construction crew had been clearing the foundation. According to them, the place smelled so strongly of rot that even the hardened workers couldn't stomach staying near it for long. When they unzipped the body bag on my table, the odor filled the lab instantly. It was the unmistakable heaviness of advanced decomposition. Sweet, cloying, almost oily in how it clung to the back of the throat. I had to step aside for a moment, not because I was unaccustomed to it, but because this odor seemed layered, as if years of decay had compressed into one suffocating presence. The remains were as I expected at first glance. Skin bloated and discolored, clothing reduced to fragile threads, bone beginning to assert itself through the ruin of flesh. I estimated time of death at a minimum of 15 years prior. That calculation was not unusual. Bricked-in burials are rarely fresh, but then I saw the jaw. The teeth shone like ivory against the ruin of the rest of the body, pristine, untouched, as if they had been preserved in a way no natural process could allow. Teeth are resilient, yes, but not impervious. 15 years in a damp stone basement should have stained them dark, fractured them, worn them down with microbial assault. Instead, they gleamed. It was not only their condition that disturbed me. The tongue, still partially intact, bore deep, bite wounds. The inner cheeks too were ragged with punctures and torn tissue. They were wounds made by teeth, this corpse's own teeth, and they were recent. I traced one with a gloved finger, and the flesh yielded like something only days old, not decades. I am not prone to melodrama, but my hands lingered longer than they should have. I wanted to reject the evidence outright, yet tactile confirmation left no room for denial. Ana Ruiz entered then, the pathology resident assigned to shadow me. Young, sharp, eager in that way only the new can be. She leaned over the body with the bright certainty of someone who has not yet been humbled by impossibility. Could be tampering, she suggested. Maybe someone planted another set of teeth, or introduced fresh tissue into the cavity. Her tone was logical, her skepticism reassuring. But I shook my head. No. Dental arches are unique as fingerprints. These teeth are anatomically continuous. With the maxilla and mandible, the tissue shows integration, not grafting. She frowned, unwilling to concede. Skepticism is useful in this work, but it can harden into denial if left unchecked. I moved to the next step, swabbing the wounds for biological material. Under the harsh white light, I inserted the sterile swab into the torn tongue, rolling it carefully across the surface. The sample, once processed, produced results that should not have been possible. Fresh human blood, fully oxygenated. For context, blood cannot remain oxygenated outside a living system. The moment blood leaves the circulation, the oxygen begins to dissipate. Within minutes, it darkens, deprived of life. To find oxygenated blood in tissue from a body dead for 15 years was not only improbable, it was biologically impossible. I explained it to Anna simply. It's as if we'd drawn this blood directly from a beating heart. She didn't respond. She only stared at the monitor, her skepticism faltering. And then it happened. As I logged, the result, a sharp tang filled my mouth. Metallic, unmistakable, the taste of iron. My tongue pressed against my teeth reflexively, searching for a wound, but found none. I had not bitten myself. There was no blood in my mouth. And yet the taste persisted, thick and intrusive, as if it belonged to me. I swallowed hard. The sensation did not fade. It was only then that I realized I had begun to carry the case inside me. The taste lingered through the morning. Faint iron braided into coffee, a phantom flavor that refused to leave. Procedure is the antidote to distraction. I let protocol take my hands, even while my mind catalogued the trespass on my tongue. We prepped the autopsy theatre with the routine choreography that steadies me. Stainless trays aligned by size, forceps nested like silver rib bones. Scalpels counted out and recorded, specimen jars labelled in block letters that erase romance and impose order. The overhead LEDs hummed themselves into a steady brightness. Refrigeration units load, a bovine sound from behind steel doors, the temperature reading a reliable 4 degrees Celsius. Anna double-checked chain of custody documentation as I signed my name with the same deliberate pressure that has followed me across 18 years of forms. Begin full examination, I said, and my voice sounded like it always does. Flat, precise, an instrument set to a single note. We started at the scalp. In forensic work, the so-called scalp peel is where we incise ear to ear over the crown, reflect the tissue forward and back to examine the skull. It is a technical term, inelegant for what it is, lifting the face away from its architecture. I narrate for the recorder because narration forces pace. Coronal incision performed, scalp reflected anteriorly and posteriorly. Skull shows no perimortem fracture lines. In simpler terms for the resident, the bones of the head are whole, no signs of violence evident at first glance. Next, the Y incision, 2 arms from each shoulder meeting mid-chest, then straight, down to the pubis. It is the most recognizable cut in this work, clinical and brutal at once. The incision performed, I say. I describe each layer like a geography lesson. Epidermis, dermis, subcutaneous fat, the pale glisten of fascia. The smell is different now. Not only decomposition, but the sweet sour bulk of it, something like old fruit left in a hot car. We open the rib cage with the rib shears, metal on bone, a harsh set of clicks that echo in the tile room, and lift. Away the sternum to reveal the thoracic cavity. I catalogue what is ordinary because the ordinary anchors us. Lungs show post-mortem edema, fluid that leaks into tissue after death. The heart is shrunken under its pericardial sac. Liver, mottled and collapsing on itself, the colour of dry leaves. The intestines, strung like an unearthed cable. All of this is expected at 15 years in a damp void. We take tissue samples, small squares, an anatomy of postage stamps, place them into formalin jars, the formaldehyde sting rising like a solvent memory into the sinuses. I note weights out of habit, even when weights have lost meaning in the late stages of decay. Routine is a rope you can hold in the dark. We leave the head for last. I tell Anna why, though she already knows. Jaw and teeth are our primary interest. We disturb them only after we've documented everything else. Preserve the most significant evidence for the end. Saying it aloud is a promise not only to the case, but to myself. If we hold the line, perhaps the line will hold us. When at last I turn the lamps to the face, the light makes a pool across the mouth like a stage. The lips, mummified around the edges, still wet toward the midline. Wet. Impossible. The tongue, what remains of it, shows the bite furrows we saw on intake. In my field, bite pressure is a quantifiable thing. Intercuspal distance, cusp tip, depth, arc of occlusion. The terms sound ornate, but they all mean this. To read a bite, we measure its geometry the way a carpenter measures a joint. We glide a gloved thumb along the molar row, feeling the enamel's impossible cleanliness, the ridge of a cusp as crisp as a newly sharpened chisel. Photograph set alpha, I say, and Anna, grateful for instruction, takes a series, straight on, 3/4 occlusal views. I prepare a soft dental impression compound, warmed until it yields like thick putty, and press it against the inner cheek to capture the pattern of injuries. When I lift the impression, the relief shows rows of punctures, indentations from teeth, regular as stitches. But there is something wrong in the spacing. Some punctures overlay others at angles that should not occur in a single bite. Anna leans in. Could those be 2 bites, one on top of the other? 2 bites leave staggered arcs, I say. These intersect. They imply closure from multiple vectors. It is a careful way to say the jaw seems to have closed from more than one direction at once. A geometry the body does not make. I hear my voice and understand that I am talking around the edges of the thing because the center is, for now, unadmittable. Anna counters with the hypothesis she has rehearsed since yesterday. Staged. Someone else's teeth. A post-mortem mockery. Observe the alveolar ridges, I answer, angling the light into the mouth. The alveolar ridge is the bony crest that houses tooth sockets. Continuity of bone. No sign of fresh dental extraction. No graft lines. The dentition belongs to this skull. In plain terms, these teeth grew here. They were never swapped. We move to radiography. The X-ray unit is older than Anna and older than my career. Its enamel casing the colour of hospital milk. its arm tremoring by a millimeter because the floor was never truly level. The phosphor plates whir through the reader, grey images blooming, like storms on a weather map. I take lateral and oblique views of the mandible, maximized for detail in the condyles and symphysis, the hinges and midline seam of the jaw. At first glance, the radiographs are ordinary. Trabecular bone like fine lace, the root structures of the teeth plunging down in pale pillars. Then I increase contrast. A line asserts itself and then withdraws, like a fish turning in murky water. Zoom on the right condyle, I say. Anna obeys, dragging the view with a fingertip. There, hairline radiolucencies, faint as erased pencil marks, traversing the condylar head. Fracture lines, and near them, denser streaks as if new bone were knitting across the breaks. Healing. Bone remodeling is a clear process in the living. Osteoclasts clearing damaged tissue, osteoblasts laying down new matrix. After death, those cells stop. There is no circulation to ferry calcium, no oxygen to power the slow construction. Healing requires life like fire requires oxygen. You remove one and the other goes dark. Artifact? Anna asks, a little too quickly. It is a reasonable demand of images. Blame the machine's old age, the reader's calibration, a trick of contrast thresholds. I change plates. New images develop. The lines remain, subtly different in orientation, as if the fractures themselves had shifted. My scalp prickles where the cap meets skin. Repeat lateral, I say, keeping my tone even. We repeat. The faint striations migrate again. Just a fraction of a millimeter, but enough that my mind experiences the movement as time. Frames separated by less than a minute, suggesting change where there should be none. I explain what I must, and I keep it simple so the words will not own me. Bone does not heal after death. These images suggest micro-movements, small shifts in the jaw's hinge, and post-mortem healing. Both are impossible. The lab answers with its own small refusal. The overhead lights dim and then steady. The refrigeration unit deepens by a note, vibration travelling through the floor into my shoes, a slow animal purr. I have a passing thought that the building has grown heavier around us. We take a break to recalibrate the reader and to reassure ourselves that process, not panic, is governing the morning. I wash my hands for longer than necessary. Soap, water, skin, friction. The ordinary friction of living palms. When I touch my tongue to the back of my teeth, the iron is there again, thinner but certain, like the ghost of a penny pressed under. The tongue in childhood games. I do not mention it. Back at the table, I collect a set of precise measurements. Intercanine distance, molar to molar width, overbite depth. Numbers are a language with no adjectives, and I speak them fluently, writing each in my neat hand. The impression cast of the inner cheek has set. I lay calipers across the paired punctures and see the overlap again. The proof that angles have crossed where they cannot. Could rigor mortis have forced the jaw closed in stages? Anna asks, searching for a mundane campfire to sit beside. Rigor, the post-mortem stiffening, is a sequence, yes, but it does not produce intersecting bite geometries. It produces clench, then release. Rigor resolves, I say. These patterns are repetitive, not singular. They recur. I don't say how many times the pattern seems to repeat. Counting repetitions in a geometry that should not exist feels like naming a storm as it forms over your house. We re-enter the body's mouth with care. I angle the laryngoscope to visualize the back of the throat. its curved blade lifting what remains of the tongue. The throat should be a collapsed tunnel of grey. Instead, it is a tunnel with a sheen. Moisture, fresh, slimes the soft palate and coats the base of the tongue. It reflects the lamplight as though the throat were practicing life. I hear the pencil scratch of the recorder's timestamp. It is unremarkable and therefore absurdly comforting. I am struck by how sound becomes a handhold. The whisper of nitrile gloves, the faint click of a capped Sharpie, the distant thud of an elevator door arriving somewhere above us. I keep speaking, because explanation is a bridge, and we need one. We are observing aberrant moisture retention, I say for the record. Then, plain language. The mouth is wet when 15 years should have made it dry. Anna's composure thins. Could there be a leak from the refrigeration line? She glances up at the vents as if condensation could explain a wet tongue. I almost appreciate the desperation. It is the exact shape of mine, only hers still has hope in it. Collect moisture sample, I instruct. We swab again, label again, refrigerate again, the ritual tightening around us like a sling. I step away to the workstation to transcribe our notes into the digital record. The monitor's blue-white light gives everything else a jaundiced cast. Lines of text march obediently down the screen. Observation, method, finding, interpretation. I enter radiographic suggestion of micro-movement at mandibular condyle, and my hands pause. Words gently normalize the remarkable. They do not save us. Language is a fence, not a fortress. But fences keep cattle from wandering at night. When I return to the table, Anna is watching the face. She doesn't realize it. Her focus is still the professional kind, but her eyes track the mouth the way you track a cradle that has just rocked when no one is near it. Do you hear that? She asks. I do not at first. Only the usual, fans, compressors, the hush of our own breath rebounding off our masks. I motion for silence. We wait. Time means nothing in rooms like this, so we make our own distances. 1 minute, then 2, then the part of a minute where attention narrows until it becomes a tube. There, so soft I think it is the memory of sound. Not sound itself, a liquid shift, a tiny peristaltic movement, an intimacy. If the body is a house, it is the sound of a sink swallowing the last trickle after tap-off. A gurgle, but smaller than gurgle deserves. A swallow diminished to a syllable. Anna's eyes snap to mine, pupils blown wide above her mask. She wants me to say it is nothing. I want to say it is nothing. In the face of the absurd, even truth seeks permission. I lean closer to the mouth. The lips are slightly parted now. I cannot say when that change occurred. Under the light, the inner surfaces shine red, the colour deepening as though the lamp were feeding it. I watch the space where tongue meets palate and feel a secondary sensation, a tightening at the hinge of my own jaw, a sympathetic ache that makes me aware of my teeth as individual stones in a wall. My molars touch, separate, touch again, and, in the gap between those small motions, I hear it a second time. That faint, indecent swallow. Record it, I say, because instruction is still the only thing I can give. Anna fumbles the camera into place, framing the mouth. The lens motor breathes. The room narrows further, until all that exists is the wet red slit, and the knowledge that somewhere the line between living and dead has slipped and is now dragging under the door. Dr. Mercer, Anna whispers, voice almost swallowed by her mask. Is this normal? Normal is a word with elastic limits, but it snaps somewhere. Mine snaps here. Document everything, I answer, and the steadiness of my tone surprises me. We proceed, but the air feels different, thicker, attentive. And the taste of iron returns as if the room has exhaled into my mouth. I swallow it down, and the sound I make is too loud in my own ears. The body answers with another, smaller one from its broken throat. Somewhere behind us, the refrigeration unit hums lower, deeper, like a note a cello would make if it could think. The lights do not flicker, but I can feel the idea of a flicker gather and hold. We stand in it. Two living bodies, beside one that has begun to behave like a memory of life, and wait for the next sound. By the next morning, the lab should have been silent. A reliquary of cold steel, sealed jars and refrigeration units humming with predictable indifference. Yet when I returned to check the blood samples, silence had been replaced by a subtle wrongness. It was not a sound exactly, but a pressure, as though the room itself had been holding its breath and exhaled when I entered. I went first to the storage refrigerator, where we had placed the vials of blood collected from the subject's mouth. I expected them to have darkened overnight, clotted into the sluggish tar that blood inevitably becomes outside a body. That is biology's law. Blood belongs inside circulation, and once it leaves, it obeys entropy like everything else. Instead, the vials gleamed. Each one was more full than when we had sealed it. The crimson inside had brightened rather than dulled. Tiny bubbles clung to the glass walls, as if the blood were freshly aerated, oxygenated, alive. I uncapped one, cautiously. The metallic scent that escaped was sharp and immediate, cutting through even the ever-present antiseptic of the room. I swirled the vial gently, watching the meniscus ripple. No clotting, no settling. It moved with the liquidity of blood taken seconds ago from a beating heart. Anna arrived moments later, her footsteps clipped with fatigue. She had the look of someone who had not slept well, though she masked it behind professional briskness. When she saw the vials, her posture faltered. "That's impossible," she said flatly. "They were half filled when we stored them. I logged the volumes myself." "Measure them," I replied, and handed her the graduated cylinder. Procedure demands measurement when belief fails. She did so, hands trembling faintly despite her effort at control. Each sample was not only full, but exceeded its original volume, as if they had drawn from a hidden source while sealed. "There's contamination," she insisted. "Condensation, infiltration. Something compromised the seals." "No." I turned one vial in the light, noting the unbroken rubber stopper, the intact sealant ring. "These vials are secure. No external fluid could have entered. What we are observing is self-replenishment." I explained it aloud, for both of us. Blood does not multiply. Volume is finite, dictated by circulation. To see volume increase without input violates conservation. Her silence was more telling than argument. We began controlled experiments, though controlled felt absurd in this context. I divided one vial into 2 sterile containers, sealing each. Hours later, both were full again, each indistinguishable from the parent. It was replication, not by division, but by generation, like a candle flame that, when split, burns as 2 whole flames, not halves. That night, I dreamed of biting. In the dream, my own molars grated against enamel until sparks flared behind my eyes, until I felt fissures open in my jaw. I woke with the taste of blood heavy on my tongue, convinced I had cracked a tooth. In the bathroom mirror, I found my teeth intact, yet the metallic tang did not leave. Back in the lab, we turned to bite impressions. Using dental wax, I captured the geometry of the subject's occlusion, the pattern his teeth would leave when biting down. The impressions should have matched the wounds on his tongue and cheeks, straightforward cause and effect. But they did not. The wounds were broader, deeper, intersecting at contradictory angles. It was as if multiple bites had occurred simultaneously, the jaw closing from impossible directions at once. I traced the impressions with calipers, mapping the arcs. This geometry should not exist, I told Anna. A jaw is a hinge. It closes in one plane. These marks suggest closure in several planes at once. She stared at the overlapping punctures in the wax mold, her skepticism fraying. It looks like more than one mouth. Or one mouth folding against itself. Her face paled. The lab grew heavier with each revelation. Refrigeration units moaned longer before cycling off. The lights dimmed in slow pulses, not flickering, but breathing. The air carried the faint scent of copper, even when no vials were open. Late, one evening, long after Anna had gone, I remained to finish documentation. The stillness was companionable. I have often preferred the morgue at night, when the building's daytime bustle retreats. That was when I heard it. At first, I mistook it for the settling of pipes, a faint, wet shift. But it persisted. A rhythm, a repetition, chewing. Not loud, not grotesque. Subtle, intimate, like the sound of someone masticating behind closed lips. I turned toward the body. The jaw lay slightly ajar, lips parted just enough to glisten under the lamp. The movement was not visible, yet the sound was undeniable, resonant in the air, though untraceable to its source. I approached slowly, ears straining. The sound deepened into something wetter, the suggestion of saliva moving. My tongue pressed, reflexively against my own teeth, and again, the taste of iron surged, thick and real. I leaned closer. The corpse's lips glistened as though freshly wetted, though I had not introduced any fluid. The faintest string of red bridged the upper and lower incisors, snapping when I exhaled too near. I pulled back, documenting verbally even as my voice wavered. Audible mastication present, visual evidence of fluid at oral cavity. Subject deceased approximately 15 years. Phenomenon unexplainable. Sleep became treacherous after that. I woke each night with the phantom sensation of grinding teeth, of my own jaw locking until pain lanced up through my temples. In the half-light of morning, I would probe my gums with my tongue, expecting to feel them torn open. Nothing. Only the taste of blood, patient and waiting. The thought returned to me as I wrote reports, as I ate bread that turned metallic in my mouth, as I drank water that carried the unmistakable tang of copper pipes. We assume decay means silence, that bodies, once stilled, are mute. But what if silence is not guaranteed? What if, somewhere in the machinery of flesh, a cycle continues beyond reason, feeding itself endlessly, looping through consumption without end? That question lingered like the taste on my tongue, and, in the morgue, the chewing never truly stopped. By the third day, the taste of iron had matured into something with texture, like the edge of a coin rasped gently against the gums. I had learned not to let my tongue linger there. Attention seemed to thicken it. Procedure remained the rope I held, and it led me, step by measured step, to the only defensible next phase: comprehensive documentation. We transformed the autopsy theatre into an observation chamber. I requisitioned the high-definition camera from pathology, bolted it to a cold shoe mounted on a tripod weighted with sandbags. A second camera, older with a slight rolling shutter wobble, was fixed above the table for a continuous overhead. I set an audio recorder at the head, another at the foot, and placed a contact microphone against the stainless surface beneath the skull, its piezo disc taped down, wires running to a small preamp. If the chewing was transmitted as vibration, the contact mic would catch it. For redundancy, I positioned a third video unit aimed at the refrigerator door, a concession to the irrational thought that everything in the room might be participating. Narrated each placement. In forensic work, narration is the scaffold you climb so you don't fall into sensation. Primary camera focused on oral cavity, secondary camera overhead, twin audio recorders, plus contact microphone on the table. Surface. Plain language followed. We're filming the mouth and listening for any sound the body might make. Anna stood by with a clipboard, eyes rimmed red from poor sleep. She kept glancing at my mouth rather than the corpse's, as if trying to determine whether the taste I kept swallowing had left residue she could see. I ignored the impulse to reassure her. Reassurance is not data. We began with a baseline, lights steady, motors at idle. I asked for silence, and we gave the room 5 minutes of stillness that stretched like a membrane. The contact mic crackled, settled. The overhead unit gave off a faint electronic whine. Somewhere in the ductwork, air moved. The corpse lay with lips parted a finger's breadth. That fresh wetness in the mouth no longer startling, but never. Normal. Commence phase 1, I said. And we did the simplest thing first. We watched. Minutes passed. The body performed ordinary death. No motion, no breath, no pulse. The chewing we had heard in the days prior did not present on cue, as if the phenomenon understood performance and refused it. I felt the first stirrings of doubt. Not about what we had observed, but about our capacity to catch it when we needed. Proof. At 30 minutes, I broke the stillness to approach the mouth with a sterile swab. Collecting sample from lingual surface, I said, then added for the lay record, swabbing the tongue. The swab drew red, as if dipped in a live wound. We sealed it, labelled it, refrigerated it. 10 minutes later, we repeated. Another swab. Another vial filled as easily as a spoon draws from a full bowl. By the end of an hour, we had 4 vials, each bright as fresh arterial draw. The refrigerator, when opened, breathed copper into the room. Blood volume is exceeding expected capacity, I said, and kept it simple. There is more blood than should be in this mouth. I felt the need to ground it in a household image. It's like scooping water from a cup and finding the cup refilled each time you look. Away! We continued gathering samples every quarter hour, the vials lined up on the tray like red-eyed sentries. When I divided one vial into 2, each refilled to its own brim by the next check. The analogy refined itself. It was not a cup, but a spring. You could scoop, and still the water would be there. The cameras recorded, unblinking. I felt my skepticism mutating. It had stopped arguing with the impossible and had begun to learn its grammar. There is a professional danger in that. When your mind grows flexible enough to wrap around an anomaly, it can follow the shape wherever it leads. Let's review footage, Anna said at last, unable to bear the waiting any longer. We rolled the first half hour. At normal speed, nothing. The corpse's mouth was an inert red aperture, lamplight bright on enamel. I scrubbed to 2x, then 4x. The pixels swam. We watched the clock in the corner tick through the minutes like a tight jaw. Try frame advance, I said. I tapped through, one image at a time, and something impossible resolved at the edge of perception. Between frames, the tongue shifted. It was not motion as the living make it. No continuous arc, no visible path. Instead, it existed here, then there, The space between those two facts abandoned. A jump cut, writ on flesh. I went back and forth. In one frame, the tongue lay flat. In the next, the lateral borders were furrowed as if pressed by molars. 2 frames later, a thin thread of red stretched between upper and lower incisors, snapped in the next. It was a strobe of small endings. "Do you see it?" I asked. Anna's hand went to her throat. "It's chewing," she whispered. "But we can't see the chew, only the endpoints." "Like missing frames," I said. "As if the motion occurs in intervals too narrow for the sensor to catch, or outside the sensor's time altogether." I kept it plain. "It's moving between our looks." We scanned the audio. The contact mic showed faint pulses, sub-audible thumps that synced with nothing except themselves. The air mics captured something wetter, a soft interior sound like someone swallowing in a church pew and trying not to be noticed. We documented. We did not speculate aloud. By afternoon, the room's attention felt curated, like a gallery where the walls had opinions. The taste in my mouth had adopted rhythm. It arrived with each new vial I capped, a phantom echo of a gesture I had not performed. Anna watched me once as I swallowed too deliberately and stepped back from the tray as if I might feed the body by proximity. Her composure cracked. "This is you," she said, voice too bright in the buzzing room. "You keep tasting it because you're letting it inside you. You're participating." I almost laughed, not from humor, but from the exact wrongness of how right she sounded. "I am recording," I said. "Recording is not participation." "Then stop." The clipboard shook in her hand. "Just stop for an hour. See if it stops." The plea had a child's structure. I recognized that as exhaustion more than argument. Still, I stood away from the table for a while and let the cameras do the looking. The vials refilled anyway, capped and inviolate. On playback, the tongue still snapped from place to place between frames, a metronome we could not hear. Anna sat, arms wrapped around herself, her breath fogging the face shield with each exhale. We had entered the part of the case where reason is not a ladder but a mirror. There remained a test I had resisted for its degree of intervention and the symbolic line it crossed. Tooth extraction. In the living, tooth removal is a controlled violence. In the dead, it is simple mechanics. Enamel yields to steel with a crisp inevitability. If the teeth were the instruments of this loop, what would happen if I removed them? At minimum, the procedure would test our premise: persistent dentition, persistent bite. At maximum, it would interrupt whatever self-consumption had trapped this body in its unending act. I prepared as for any dental extraction. Elevator, forceps, gauze, a small chisel for stubborn roots. I explained for the record. We will extract select teeth to determine whether the pattern of injuries ceases. In plain terms, we're removing teeth to see if the biting stops. Teeth do not regrow. If removed, absence should be permanent. I began with the upper left first premolar. The elevator slipped between bone and tooth with a familiar creak. The forceps grasped crown. I rotated gently, feeling the periodontal ligament surrender in small size. When the tooth came free, it lay in my palm, clean, white, with a tiny curl of tissue that should not have looked fresh and did. I placed it in a sterile dish. We photographed the gap. A neat socket, bloodless, its interior strangely glossy. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. I checked the dish. The premolar lay where we had left it, inert. I leaned over the mouth. The socket was no longer empty. "Impossible," Anna said, too softly to be heard by the recorder. The premolar had returned to its berth, seated as precisely as a gem in a setting. The dish still contained its twin, which by any rational accounting could not be a twin. I felt the architecture of my expertise, 18 years of calibrated expectation, tilt. I extracted a canine. The canine is a keystone tooth. Its root is long, its extraction a small ordeal. It came clean, sat in the dish beside the first. We photographed the gap, marked the time, stepped back. In 4 minutes. The number matters because numbers are. The last safe objects. We looked again. The canine had returned. The dish held 2 canines, 2 premolars, 4 mute accusations. It was not regrowth. Regrowth implies continuity, a process we could intrude upon and pass. This was replacement, reappearance, as if the absence had been a momentary editorial decision, erased by an author who refused our edit. The analogy came unbidden. You delete a letter in a word processor, look back, and see the letter restored, your cursor shoved aside. I should have stopped. The word should has no traction here, but it still describes a contour. I did not stop because I wanted an ending that matched cause to effect. That want is its own appetite, and I fed it. I prepared to remove the final molar on the lower right. Molars are stubborn. They sit square, anchored by multiple roots like a chair with thick legs driven into the floor. I braced the jaw with my non-dominant hand and set the forceps around the crown, metal to enamel, the contact singing in my bones. The taste of iron rose, anticipatory, and for a second I thought I could hear my own molars grinding, a private noise near the ear where jaw meets skull. "Ready," I said, though the word meant nothing to anyone. I began to rock the molar, the ligament whispered, the socket opened by degrees, the room's hum narrowed to a line. The cameras watched. Anna held her breath. The jaw snapped shut, not on my fingers. I had the luck or reflex to withdraw. The teeth met on nothing visible, and clamped, a guillotine closing on air. The sound was not loud. It was decisive, a block dropping into place in the base of a well. Pain bloomed in my mouth, not on my hand. It came in with heat and certainty, a flare under the gum line on my own lower right, radiating along the mandibular nerve the way lightning chases copper. I staggered back, hand to face, half ashamed of the gesture in front of a student, and half beyond shame. When I drew my palm away, my glove was smeared a diluted red. I bit my own cheek in the startle I thought at first, then knew I had not. The blood had welled from the sulcus around my lower right molar, from my own periodontal pocket, as if the body on the table had completed the bite and I had hosted the consequence. Anna was speaking, my name a plea, the clipped syllables of someone trying to stitch panic into action. "Dr. Mercer, sit down, please, sit down." She guided me to the stool, gloved fingers gentle on my sleeve, the way one would handle an overheated instrument. I pressed gauze to my gum, more to occupy my hands than to stop bleeding that already knew its limit. When the first dizziness passed, I stood again. The jaw on the table had relaxed into its small gape. Under the lamp, the teeth shone with their indecent cleanliness, indifferent to our flinches, our oaths, our need. The cameras had captured the snap. On playback, the mouth lay open in one frame, closed in the next. No arc, no blur, only position A and position B, and the implication of a force that disdained our senses. The audio showed a single clipped impact, and, a breath later, a wet sound, like the small swallow of someone who has finished with their mouth. I cleaned my gum as one cleans an instrument. The taste of iron only intensified, confirmation bias made tangible on the tongue. Anna said nothing this time. Her eyes asked a question I had no interest in answering, because the answer had begun to cohere without my consent. The loop was not a function of tissue. If it were, extraction would have interrupted it. The loop was not a property of bone. If it were, the radiographs would have given us a lever. The loop belonged to the act, an act so integral to what the person had been at the end that death could not shut it off. Chewing, swallowing, biting. The self meeting itself with the only tool the self had left. A final behavior ossified into a rule. I spoke for the recorder because I needed a sentence that did not tremble. Observed phenomena suggest recurrent oral activity independent of biological function. Then, in plain words, the mouth keeps biting even though the body is dead. But the sentence did not hold the whole of it. The loop was participatory. It sought congruence. Where it found mouths, it borrowed them. I looked at the dish of teeth that should not exist and thought the thought I had been refusing. It wasn't just his blood anymore. It was ours. As soon as I named it, the room seemed to exhale, as if pleased that we were finally speaking its language. The refrigerator motor idled down into a sonorous quiet. The overheads steadied into a brightness that felt less like light than like attention. Anna broke the spell with the oldest request science makes of fear. "Stop," she said. Not a command this time, but a prayer. "Please, stop." I nodded, not because the plea was persuasive, but because the case had crossed the boundary where more data would not be evidence, only intake. I sealed the dishes. I powered down the cameras. I logged the time as if that mattered to a thing that stepped between our seconds. Procedure is not merely what we do, it is how we tell ourselves who we are. I tightened it around me like a coat, against weather I could not name. When I finished the last entry, I felt the fatigue of held breath come rush back. In its wake, another taste arrived on my tongue. Thinner than blood, metallic still, but with a faint sweetness like the aftertaste of an old spoon. The body on the table made no sound. The dish of duplicate teeth sat where I had left it, small proofs of an author who kept revising. I turned off the recorder. The room went very quiet. The silence was not peace. It was the pause after a verdict is read. Outside the theatre, the corridor stretched away in its familiar pale. I imagined the report I would have to write, the terms I would choose to turn an unholy arithmetic into paragraphs that would not be laughed out of a meeting. Inconclusive, contaminated, instrument error, words as sandbags. Looked back once before I left. The mouth lay open, benediction or threat. I did not listen for the chewing. It is possible to live by not listening, for a while. We wheeled the body to storage. I washed my hands. The water ran clean over my skin and into the steel basin. I waited for the taste to thin. It did not. It thickened. By the time I reached my office, I already knew what the official version would be. It is no small horror to discover that the most honest thing you can write is a lie made tidy. I opened a new report and typed the first sentence. We use when truth will not sit. Case inconclusive. I paused with the cursor blinking, a metronome measuring the last seconds of one life and the first seconds of another. Through the wall, very faint, a refrigeration unit settled into its lower note. I saved the document but did not submit it. The act of saving felt like a hinge. The next chapter of any case is the public one. Signatures, summaries, the machinery of denial. And yet in the soft tissue behind my molars, something pulsed once, twice, like a heart remembering itself. The report I finally submitted bore little resemblance to the truth. I wrote it the way one writes a eulogy for someone you did not know well, respectful, vague, careful not to provoke questions. Case inconclusive. Dental structures intact. Samples compromised during storage. Recommend no further examination. The sentences were scaffolds made of air, but they were sturdy enough for bureaucracy. A clerk would read them, nod, file the folder into the oblivion of archives. My colleagues would never learn what had breathed in our lab, and the anomaly, whatever it was, would never have to endure the insult of being reduced to bullet points. I signed my name with deliberate weight, though the hand that held the pen trembled faintly. There are truths you cannot carry into daylight, without them collapsing into absurdity. I knew that. Yet as I filed the paperwork, I tasted iron again, as though the blood itself objected to being struck from the record. Anna handed in her resignation the next morning. She did not even come to me directly. She left the envelope on my desk, the corner weighted by her hospital badge. Inside, her handwriting was hurried, the words uneven. Dr. Mercer, I cannot continue here. This case is not finished, and I cannot be near it. Please understand. She had underlined the last 3 words twice. I found her in the corridor before she left, coat slung over her arm, eyes hollow. You don't have to leave, I told her. We can compartmentalize. Treat it as an aberration. File it away. Her laugh was brittle, almost a cough. You think you can file it away? It's not done with you, Dr. Mercer. I see it every time you swallow. It's inside you now. She turned before I could answer, her shoes clicking down the corridor, carrying her out of St. Jude's and out of my career. I watched her go with the same detached ache I'd once felt, watching an amputated limb carried away on a gurney. Something necessary had been taken from me. After she left, I tried to return to normal cases. Dental identifications from house fires, chart comparisons on homicide victims, work I had done 100 times before, work that should have restored the clean edges of protocol. But every case was corrupted by taste. Bread carried the tang of iron. Fruit bruised itself into bitterness against my tongue. Even water was thick, with the flavour of old coins. I learned quickly that I could not eat in public without wincing. Alone in my kitchen, I chewed each bite mechanically, swallowing copper until nausea ended the meal. Hunger became preferable to that metallic ghost. At first, I told myself it was psychosomatic, a symptom of stress, of overexposure to blood samples, of poor sleep. I consulted a colleague in oral pathology, described it as persistent phantom taste. She suggested zinc deficiency, reflux, neuralgia. She prescribed lozenges. None of it helped. The truth was simpler. The case had not left me. At night, I woke with my jaw clenched so tightly that my temples throbbed. Some mornings, I found faint ridges along the sides of my tongue where my molars had pressed through the night. Once, I woke with blood on my pillow, a thin smear from a bite I had no memory of making. 18 years of practice had taught me that teeth are history, indelible records of identity. Now I wondered if they could be conduits. Black boxes, yes. But what if the box had been recording more than I understood? What if it was not only preserving the past, but transmitting it? In my darkest hours, I recalled the duplicate teeth in the dish, the way absence corrected itself, the jaw that closed on nothing and left me bleeding. The loop had not stayed sealed in that corpse. It had opened and reached. I thought often of Anna's final words. It's not done with you, she was right. It was not. Even now, years later, I still taste the blood. It threads through every sip, every bite, every swallow. I have learned to live with it, the way one lives with tinnitus or a limp. But sometimes, when I am very still, I feel more than taste. I feel pressure against my tongue, the faint pinch of enamel sinking where no teeth should touch. I know then that the case is still consuming itself inside me. Not an infection, not possession. Something worse. A loop that has mistaken me for its continuation. I file no reports anymore. I no longer teach. My resignation was not formal. It was gradual, a retreat by degrees until I no longer stood in the light of the profession I once trusted. But when I pass the mirror and catch my reflection, I sometimes see the faintest shimmer of red between my teeth. And in that instant, I wonder whether I am looking at myself or at the echo of a body still chewing in the dark of a church basement. Even now, as I write this, I run my tongue along my molars and feel the phantom bite. Marks return. The taste follows, metallic and endless. Some truths devour themselves, and some truths, once tasted, never let go.